Hello and welcome back to another panel in the summit of the Striker Texas 2022 Soccer Summit. Sorry, having a bit of video choppy issues. Thanks so much for joining us. This Soccer Summit panel is going to be all about comparing ways to grow women's soccer across the world. As we all know, I mean, even today with the historic settlement agreement between the USSF Federation and the US Women's National Team, women's soccer is growing, it's fighting for equal rights, it's becoming more visible, and it is kind of happening all around the world, all in these different ways. So today, we've got three really special guests who are going to bring in different perspectives within the women's game in regards to marketing, TV, ways in which the leagues are growing, how they're changing, branding, all these kind of really important factors that have helped the game get to where it is today, and hopefully push it even further forward to where it's going to be tomorrow. I am Theodore Lloyd-Hughes for the Striker Texas. As you may or may not know, I'm joined by Katie Scallon from the Houston Dash, Chief Marketing Officer, Adriana Terrazas of Univision and the fantastic Mexican football podcast, and Ashlee Fontes of After Football. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I wanted to kind of break the ice a little bit by trying to maybe getting the listeners or the viewers to know you a little bit better by asking you to talk about a little bit about who you are and what was your favorite goal from the year of 2021. Katie, we'll start with you down in Houston. How you doing, Katie?
Great. Thanks so much for having me. So, Katie Scallan, Chief Marketing Officer for the Houston Dynamo Football Club and Houston Dash and PNC Stadium. I don't know if you noticed on that little hype video that we started out with. I need to get you guys some new footage because you have our old logo and the old stadium name. So we'll get that covered.
Apologies.
No. So, anyways, but super excited to be here. Been with the club for the last 3 years and was brought on to kind of lead the rebrand and champion that. Previously was with Toyota. I had led all the marketing, sports marketing, PR, all that jazz from the Toyota side of the house, as well as worked for the parent company that also owns AS Roma in Italy, as amongst other golf and entertainment entities. So excited to be here. As far as my favorite goal, I'm going to go with soccer goal, obviously not business goal, but let's go with when Miss Maria Sanchez joined the Houston Dash from Tigres, and her first goal with us last summer, which led to a victory over Orlando. So we're going to say that's my favorite goal.
Great goal. Remember it like it was yesterday. Adriana, if you want to jump in next.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Just a pleasure to meet you all. I've been covering sports ever since I was in college, like some 16 years ago. And obviously, with Liga MX Femenil coming along, it was just like a dream come true because I played soccer my entire life, and I'd never even imagined having a professional women's league down here. I mean, usually it was just something you would hear about just randomly in some other countries. And now, obviously, since it started in 2017, it's just been such a huge push to women in general, and just really proud to be part of it, covering as much as I can with it. I'm currently in TUDN in TUDN, previously at ESPN and some other places, but yeah, just really psyched to have the opportunity to do this as a professional, just covering sports every single weekend and having the joy of just seeing so many stories and so many athletes accomplish so many goals is just amazing to have on a day-to-day basis. And my favorite goal, it would probably just have to be a moment. I'm going to cheat a bit on that. Last year, the women's national team played back at the Azteca for the first time in over 13 years. So just seeing the team, just sing the national anthem, I think that was even more special than the actual goals themselves. So I'm going to cheat a bit on that, but that was just really special.
Ashlee, if you want to introduce yourself next.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here. So, Ashlee Fontes Comber, I am currently with Ata Football as VP of Market Strategy. Before that, specifically related to soccer, I grew up as a player. I transitioned into coaching, got into operations at DC United Women, then transitioned to lead the Washington Spirit. Recently founded the Girls Academy League with another core group of folks across the U.S. when U.S. Soccer dropped their development academy. And then I also serve on the board of directors for United Soccer Coaches. So this is my 5th year serving, and I'm in that presidential role this year. So excited to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Favorite goal, Ashlee?
Oh, favorite goal. That's right. That's right.
Come on, I want to get to know you just that little bit better.
Yeah. I cheated a little bit on my end because I went through all the highlights for ATA football, because honestly, there's a lot of women's football on now, right? So it's hard to find one. But the one that stuck out was Marie Antoinette Catato from PSG. A ball was just chipped into her from inside the box, and she timed it perfectly, goes down, and does a volley right to the far post. So it was nice.
Fantastic. Katie, Adriana, are you familiar with ATA football? Just out of curiosity.
No, I have to say I'm not. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a new learning opportunity for me as well.
Yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm just here marketing ATA football. I should be here marketing the Striker Texas, but I am such a huge fan of the platform, and I think it's maybe a good place to start off with. When we talk about growing the women's game, we talk about being able to actually find it, whether it's on television or on streaming or on social media or just on major news outlets kind of main page. You know, if you think you're going to put the MLS there or you're going to put Real Madrid there, why aren't you putting, you know, major women's teams as well? So I think something which is really cool about ATA football is how easily it's been able to put all these games around the world, really, really good quality HD. But maybe more interestingly for me is I think it's created a space where it's a brand, a streaming service, really that identifies with women's football first and foremost. And so I guess where I really want to open up the debate is, how do we feel about where American women's soccer is maybe right now, domestic league women's soccer is, for where you can find it. So it's on Paramount Plus, which we all know is an exclusive streaming service with, Katie, you might know the exact amounts, but something like 8 to 10 games on big CBS a year. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I think that's about right.
Yeah, so you get about 10 national games, and then mostly it's behind the paid app streaming service. And then Adriana, I know in Mexico it feels like, at least from afar, the games are far more available on television, often with the similar broadcast teams and at least same camera angles as the men's team. So maybe we'll start with you, Ashlee, kind of going back to ATA. What do you feel like the market is right now for broadcasting American women's soccer, both domestically and worldwide? And where do you think maybe ATA came in to see this gap in the market and think we could put English women's football, French women's football, and maybe more in this platform?
Sure. I'll do the best I can to answer that. I think, ultimately, I think we've known that there's been a thirst in this market for a long time. I mean, we can date all the way back to the 99ers, right? With the U.S. women's national team selling out 90,000 people in the stands. And Brandy Chastain scores the game-winning PK, rips off her shirt. There's that big Nike endorsement, right? But we knew that, like, for some reason, we have done a phenomenal job in this country with women's soccer. We've grown it at the youth level tremendously well, even though it's an incredibly fragmented market. It's extremely competitive. We've done a great job developing, and I think this fan base that we continue to grow has always been in demand of that. They don't want to wait 4 years to watch a big event, right? They don't want to wait for the Olympics, don't want to wait for the World Cup. So there was always prime opportunity for it. But I think, look, the powers that be hold the keys to the gate, right? And finally, there was this, just like, in my opinion, this big women's movement where there was more eyes and on women's interests. Companies were becoming to be put under a microscope to see how they were involved in that. And I think some of these broadcasters, these companies start saying, okay, well, how do we get involved as in terms of like social responsibility. But now I think they're starting to see, hey, well, there's true investment opportunity here, right? There's true return in this. Ata football kind of helps fill that void. I can't speak to the true origins of it because the two co-founders are phenomenal, and they crafted this idea, Esmeralda Negren and Hannah Brown. Absolutely, I mean, they are the reason why I jumped on board to work with them. Not only the vision that they had, but they're phenomenal human beings and leaders. But they crafted this idea, they pitched it, they got the investment group behind it, partnered with NBC. Now you can see over 200 matches live and on demand on their platform, which is even much more than, creating that visibility, but it's creating community around, essentially a community that has wanted to be connected but hasn't had the space to exist. So did I answer that or did I just ramble? I think I got some.
No, a bit of
right?
both. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. I want to just touch on that last bit because I think online community, again, going back to Atta, being able to host so many women's football matches on an exclusively women's platform, I think it's been really cool. Katie or Adriana, please maybe jump in on this one. How important do you think that online community has been to growing the game, whether it's from on the boots on the ground marketing or from maybe a more traditional television angle? How important does that kind of like online community, creating a space where people can share ideas and then that boosts like the more traditional market research areas?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously from my perspective with the NWSL here in the States, that broadcasting deal was a massive step forward for the league. And because it's been proven, if we get women's sports on TV, it'll draw an audience. There's no question. So, rallying the troops through the online communities and the soccer communities and and now folks having a place that they can actually go and see our games on a regular basis has tremendously helped just simple awareness. And there's so much opportunity in the women's soccer world and interest. So, anything, all these things working in tandem to get us there is it's going to move the needle demonstratively.
Yeah, definitely. I think social media has been such a huge part of just making sure the game grows, not only within the audience that already existed, but also in the way to create a community around the teams. We saw, for instance, Liga MX Femenil teams slowly, because it was just something I think they discovered as they went along, just give each of the women's teams, for instance, a Twitter account. It was something as simple as having a particular space where you could actually find information regarding the women's team and not necessarily the men and the women and the youth level teams. So teams just started giving their own social media accounts to the women's teams, and it started creating a community that started trending every time they started playing. They introduced players, they introduced the coaches, because there was no other way of actually getting to know the players. There's no database. Not even from the league. It's still kind of, you kind of have to search around and ask fans and ask some family members if they know some information and when did she start playing and stuff like that. So once we started having those social media accounts where fans could actually go and meet the players and know what time their next games were and where they could actually buy tickets, that really started growing not only an audience, but a community in itself. And you started seeing all these conversations before the games, after the games. You started seeing people complaining about why isn't this player being in the starting lineup. So you started seeing all those conversations with something as simple as having a social media account that you could just go back and reference back to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more.
Oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to say the Dash social media account for us, Adriana, same thing. I mean, it's that repository for all the fandom, all the fans to go to. And, it has garnered international awareness in the top 10 in the world. So it's really proven to be such a vital tool for us as a club. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's instrumental in the success.
And we know you guys because of the Tigres games. Now there's like a small relationship / rivalry with Houston now, thanks to the game playing with Tigres. But now people here know the Dynamo. They know like, oh no, that's Maria Sanchez's team, and they came to play here, and we went to play there, right? So it's something as simple as that. But you get the conversations going. And then sometimes during the weekends and some of the social media accounts, you can see have a little bit more freedom to them. So they'll start actually talking with like to each other, right? Like one team will start answering to the other team, to the rival team during the game. And it'll get fans like really, really excited because they'll start to see that they're not being offensive. They're just trying to like taunt each other and try to just get that conversation going. And it's something, again, it's just so simple, but it gets the conversation going. It gets players trending. And that just makes the league in itself grow a lot more.
How delicate do you think the balance is between accessibility, sustainability, like valuing something? Because obviously Ashlee Atta now has the subscription service. It was launched as a free platform, which I think is both really good because we believe the same thing at the Strike of Texas. If you've got something, you've got to value it. And Katie, like you're saying, so much of the dash is impressions and visibility. Has been this social media boom, top 10 impressions in the world for women's football. How do you then get people to kind of go that next step? What's the trick to growing the actual, whether it's buying season tickets or whether it's paying for Atta football or whether it's writing a nice email to Liga MX Femenil and saying, can we have some stats? Like, what is the next step to growing those games? It's kind of open to anyone on that one.
Yeah, I can jump in and give a little perspective. I think honestly, look, it's marketing, right? At first to attract people, and you got to create that brand awareness, create some kind of attraction. But then once you get them, what is their experience? So you have to, what are you delivering? You have to deliver that value. If they're going to a game, right, in Houston, then the atmosphere should be great. Like, is the accessibility to other fans, the players, what's the game quality like? What's the concession? Everyone likes good concessions. Like, what is the overall experience there? That when they leave there, they're going to want to come back. Right. So it's the same thing on the side with like Atta football. It's like, well, I want to watch a game. So if they pick a game and they watch it, is it good quality or is it, which it is, let me just say that it's premium quality, but we went through this phase of, in the very beginning of when we would pick up, somebody would pick up a women's sporting game, right? They'd put it on TV and the broadcast was terrible. The quality was not good. So then why is somebody going to want to, we're already fighting some incredibly embedded institutional myths that women's sports are inferior, that it's, they're not entertaining, they're not real athletes. And then if you put it on TV and it's poor quality, then everyone's just like, yep, that just reinforces it's bad, it's this and that. So if we're going to put it out, it's got to be premium. It's got to do it justice. So then the fan that's sitting there watching it enjoys it and engages and becomes connected, right? And the more we can show them that, the more the connected they get and they start to identify, and now they're attached to us, right?
Yeah, I think it also has to do with just how the clubs make that strategy surrounding this new product that's their women's team, right? So we started off, again, with the social media accounts, and then all of a sudden, some of the teams actually started having their own particular women's jerseys, right? And that was just like a breakthrough thing because it started saying, this team is just as important. It deserves its own jersey. It deserves its own identity, despite the fact that, it's the same club, but you have the women's side and you have the men's side. So when you start seeing all those little details that the club started putting into the team, I mean, obviously it also starts with just getting to know the players. Some of the teams, I mean, Theodore is a huge example. They just started bringing in Mexicans from abroad with huge experience, national team experience. But some other teams just didn't have that possibility, right? So they started building their own identities on social media. They had their own jerseys. They started making sure the tickets were available in case you bought a men's side ticket, which isn't the best way. But yeah, you bought a men's side ticket, it gave you instant access to the women's game, right? So you started making it more available for fans to actually just be curious, because you did have an audience to start off with, right? It was a small niche. But once you started making it really available for other fans, they were like, I'm going to give these guys just a chance. Let me see what the game's about. And we started seeing that on TV broadcasts as well. If someone got a name wrong, because usually the league has lots of players have two names, right? So you're not sure which one they prefer when they're starting off. You're getting to know the players as well. And then someone would actually like tell you on social media, hey, that's not the name that that player prefers. You can tell from her social media that she prefers this other name. So people would be really, really vocal about when something was going wrong and when something was going well as well. They would say, hey, this was particularly good. We loved this post-game interview, but you messed up because this player doesn't like this name. She has this nickname and we should just call her that. So all these little things surrounding the teams with the clubs, Pachuca, for instance, they had this it was really intelligent what they did. Every year they have the official club photo, right? You have all the roster and everyone smiles and you have the jersey on. And their first official photo was with the women's team as well. No one else did that. And it was just such a big hit because it said to the fans, hey, we have a women's team and they're just as important and we want you to support them. Because one of the best or easiest things about Liga MX Femenil is you have the men's side, right? So it's almost obvious that you're going to support the same club for the women and the men. Although I do know some people that support different teams, different squads, but it's just easier that way, right? If you're a Chivas fan, you're going to root for the men's side and the women's side. And so then Pachuca, when they had this photo come out, they were just having all the men's players embrace the women's players, just bring them in that we're the same club, right? You have to support us both. So those little details also have been really, really great in making sure that people embrace the entire club identity and not just separate them with the men and the women, right? Which is really difficult at first.
Yeah, and I would just layer into that. And actually, Tigres was our case study. So as Adriana alluded to, when we started we've built this relationship between our clubs. And when we had our staff down there for a game, they started taking note of the equality between and the leveraging of the men's and the women's. And they brought that back, and we had a brainstorming session. And this was prior to our 2020 rebrand. And it was, we always struggle. We are the Houston Dynamo Football Club, which encompasses everything, but the Houston Dash is our women's squad. And unlike the international teams, we have two different names. There's a menagerie of reasons why that exists, because the leagues own things and whatever. But point of the story is we created this desire to build that one club, much like Tigres had. So what did that mean? That meant a lot of things for us because, first of all, it meant us marketing the women on the same level as the men. So every time I had a billboard on the street for a man, I had a Dash player on there as well now. We were elevating just simple marketing and advertising. Then, and layered into that was, okay, now let's create mutual fandom between the two squads, like you were stating, Adriana. It's let's make men, women, the fans of the Dynamo, fans of the Dash. Let's make the fans of the Dash fans of the Dynamo. First of all, it's just good business, but secondly, it just makes sense. And then, also let's build the camaraderie between the squads. I mean, they were running in silos a couple of years ago. Nobody knew what the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. And now, they train at the training facility, together. I mean, not together, but, they're at the same facility. They are going to each other's matches. They're involved in the same appearances. They're following and supporting each other on social media and at charitable events in the community. And so it was really about building that one club that we took our cues from Tigres. And so thank you for that. And then it's really been great because it has elevated the women because, we're able to do more now with them. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, we have one staff. So we're having to go, thread the needle every day. Like every minute of my day, I'm like doing Dynamo 1 second Dash, 1 second Dynamo, and it's much more efficient and effective if I can be marketing and promoting and communicating them together to the point that I can. Now there is some, guardrails between the leagues that we can't cross, but I think that one club mentality, that building off the mutual fandom, all those things are going to only elevate both of our squads, not just the women. So we've found that to be very helpful and very successful for us.
I just want to bring in Ashlee here before she has to leave us. Ashlee, I think this is a really interesting topic and something that I've really thought about a lot, which is this idea of collaboration, sharing space, sharing the spotlight, you know, men's, women's clubs, men's badges, marketing, etc. But often, you know, I mentioned it a little bit with the NWSL getting 8 national appearances on television a year. I don't know what the MLS get, but I'm sure it's vastly more. What do you think the future looks like when it comes to kind of women's sport, women's soccer taking what it needs to get and kind of sharing what it needs to get? And do you think collaboration is the way, or do you think maybe women's sport needs to like push itself out there and create not like its own ESPN, but kind of have spaces where, you know, it's just women's sport?
Ooh, I think that's a really tough one. I know I go back and forth, usually depending on who I'm talking to, based on how the conversation's going. But there's something to be said about not going in at it alone, right? So like I mentioned before, there's these institutional myths that they've honestly been established for over a century now, right? If you look at, I'll just focus on the US, but the US in sports, it's NFL. They've been around for 100 years. It's NBA, it's MLB. So you're in a very hyper-masculine space. So when you, in a space as well that women have been devalued and sexualized in nature and been inferior in sport. So trying to fight against 100+ years of institutional myths that have been established is tough if you go in at alone. So I definitely think there's some value in collaboration. I think you have to be very intentional with who you collaborate with, though. So you see that this in the market right now, where now the light bulb is on and people are saying, okay, women's sports, that's an investment opportunity. Well, now you're getting in you know, some disingenuous folks that, you know, aren't going to ride it out for long haul, because it is going to take time. Look at the MLS, like what, 20+ years to really get set up and established. You need to collaborate with people that understand the vision, understand the history, right? I mean, you look at WUSA, you look at WPSL, leagues in the United States that survived 3 years and that was it. I actually focused, my doctoral dissertation is on new venture survival. So, you know, the first 3 years is trying. A lot of businesses fail within 3 to 5 years. So the NWSL is in historic territories right now, which is phenomenal. But I think you definitely need to keep an open mind to collaboration, but make sure it's intentional in who you're partnering with, because it can either lead you down a very poor path and away from all the institutions that you believe in or that's needed for the women's game, or you can have a dynamite collaboration and can really carry you through.
That's a brilliant answer. And thank you so much for your time, Ashlee. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, everyone who is watching and listening, get at a football. I'm a subscriber. I love it. And it's how I keep up with a lot of the best English, French, and beyond football matches. So yeah, all the best,
Thank
Ashlee.
you for having me. All right, take care.
Cheers. Katie and Adriana, I wanted to just kind of zoom back in a little bit there, because you were talking about the rebrand. You're talking about threading the needle, Katie. I love that. I want to talk about how Liga MX Femenil and then the NWSL could kind of learn from each other, or what you're borrowing. So Katie, you mentioned Tigres being a case study. Do you ever feel, Katie, that you would love MLS and NWSL to become one and it to mirror Liga MX Femenil more? Is that something you'd be interested in? Would that help you do your job? Do you think that would help the Dash?
Wow, that's a deep question. That's above my pay grade. No, I mean, honestly,
any thoughts?
Yeah, no. Obviously, I think there's the obvious that a lot of stuff would be simpler. I mean, if you compare it to, yes, they're both soccer, but they're two totally different leagues. It would be like, every 5 minutes I'm working with the NFL, and the other 5 minutes I'm working with the NBA. I mean, I just have two complete worlds I'm navigating every minute of every day. I mean, not just me, and obviously the whole organization. but that's us because we obviously own both teams, and most markets the ownership is different. I think it's only like 3 or 4 that have both. But so of course, would there be efficiencies? Absolutely. Even down to uniforms, kits. I mean, we've got Adidas and Nike. I mean, I'm I'm under different timelines when I'm designing, when I have our team is designing the new kits every year, because we design out of the 2 kits, we design one every year. So of course there'd be efficiencies, effectiveness. I do think what we're seeing now is a collaboration. Major League Soccer is obviously vested in NWSL's success. So I do know they like to offer best practices and help lift up the women's league and help them along, and any kind of learnings and contacts and synergies between the league offices. It's beginning in the last, I would say, year or so. So that's been a marked improvement. But as far as whether in the end is it the right thing for the sport, gosh, that's a pretty deep question that I don't know if I'm equipped to answer at this point. But it
Me
definitely,
neither.
it definitely would be interesting. I mean, people often ask, well, why are your teams different names? Everywhere else it's Tigres and Tigres, or Liverpool and Liverpool, and I'm like, well, because in our situation, the leagues own the names, we don't. I mean, so during the rebrand, I would have loved to potentially consider merging and having one name, but it's not an option. So there's things like that would be interesting to go down those pathways if that ever happened. But I think that the NWSL is definitely on the right track. They with their broadcasting and with their organization and the first CBA and all these things. It's starting, but you know like was mentioned earlier, it's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. And MLS is over 20 years old, so it's we got a long runway before all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, I would say. But yeah, so there's good and bad.
It's not an easy it's not easy for Liga MX Femenil either, because once the league started, we had a relegation on the men's side, and then the question was, what's going to happen to the women's team if the men's side gets relegated and then isn't obligated to have a women's team? So that conversation started happening. We don't have relegation right now, so then we started forgetting about that. But it did start to worry that you would have someone like Veracruz or Puebla, or Lobos, who actually had a really great team at some point on the women's side. What was going to happen to the women's team once that the men's side was relegated and not part of Liga MX? It would be in part of the second division and thus not obligated to have a women's team. And it did happen, right? Some of the teams were relegated. The women's teams tried to carry on, but obviously it just wasn't financially possible, because you had a team that was already sent to another division, and that was just an entire economic burden for those clubs as well, because you lose TV rights, and that's usually where most of the teams get most of their money from, right? Most of their income. So on the other hand, that's sometimes something that could happen just because one same club has both teams, and once you're not in one league, you're not really obligated to have a women's side anymore. So that's like the part of Liga MX Femenil that some people don't really know. Obviously, again, it's not a conversation right now because we don't have relegation on the men's side for a while. We might have it in a couple of years back. So it's something that they should consider. It's something that could worry a women's project in the long run, just knowing that the men's side is unstable in that sense, because we don't have relegation on the women's side either.
Well, and I'll jump in and say, it goes the other way, where, Liverpool women, Katie, you brought them up. The men's team won the title in the English Premier League, the men's Premier League. Their budget is about $150 million on their players. The women's team got relegated from the FA Women's Super League in the same season, and their budget was probably 1%, 2% of that. So you're seeing the other way, which is, your men's team can be taking off and it's still not getting passed down. So like you said, whether it's Liga MX or in England, these relationships aren't always equal.
Yeah, agreed. It's it's something that most of the teams don't really. It's something that comes up, by the end of the season when you start seeing that relegation process, and that's when you start thinking about everything that could go wrong regarding the women's team. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of making sure that both projects are equally just self-sustainable. I think just making sure that if something happens to the men's side, the women's team can keep on going, and if something happens to the women's team, the men's side can keep on going, and just make them not exclusive, but try to make sure that both projects are equally solid, right? You don't want one to hurt the other. You just want them to benefit from each other. But if something bad does happen to one of the squads, make sure that the other one isn't affected in the same way.
Thank you so much, Adriana. That was incredibly kind of you to pick up where I left off. I'm sorry, I'm having a lot of technical difficulties today. But yeah, like you said, it's not a perfect relationship. Adriana, you obviously mentioned comparing the men's and the women's teams there. Is there anything you see in NWSL, whether it's branding, broadcasting, the leagues, the draft, that you would love to see in Liga MX?
Probably the salary too bad.
Did I cut out again? Sorry.
No, I think she did this time.
I think I can.
There she is. Well,
yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
The salaries you were saying, Adriana.
Yeah, the salaries would be good to start off with. Yeah, I love how, despite the fact that they don't depend on MLS like Katie was mentioning, still they have a really huge identity. I mean, we've seen how the Reign has grown and have that international support with the OL group, right? We're starting to see how the Dash starts come to Liga MX Femenil and have those friendlies as well, which has been hugely important for Liga MX and I guess for Dash as well, just to have that international rivalry, I guess, starting off with some other teams. Yeah, I'd also like to mention probably one of the things that Liga MX Femenil could benefit looking into the NWSL is probably all the way the players have united and have that union and have that organization to make sure that their voices are heard. We do have a players association down here. It's just not as organized or as strong, or it doesn't get as much attention as I think it should at some point. It did start getting some support from the Men's Players Association as well at the beginning when salaries came up and we started seeing players that weren't even getting $200 every month. It was just not. It started being this eternal conversation that, like Ashlee was mentioning, it's just something that's embedded, which is, do you want the women to have the same salaries as the men? And at first, it was just a conversation saying we just want them for it to be enough for them to actually be professional players, and then we'll get into the conversation of it being the same. But you had players that had to invest their own money to make it to practice and have their own shoes and their own uniforms at some point. So if we had a stronger players association, which I do think the NWSL has a way stronger players association, I think that would benefit the league over here as well.
yeah, but that just happened.
Yeah.
like weeks, like days, weeks ago. So
yeah.
it was a process. I mean, they never had a CBA until, like I said, a couple weeks ago. So, but it's nice to see that threshold has been crossed now, or as
yeah,
it were.
just the fact of players actually uniting before they actually reach the agreement. I think that's something that we still don't see as much over here. You're still depending on those key players that have gotten attention because they're former national team players, or maybe some of them are going into coaching. So you still depend on them raising their voice first, and then everyone else will follow, and not just because you're a player, you get the opportunity to have that really strong voice and make sure that it's heard. So I think that's why they're still not light years ahead, but yeah, still pretty much ahead in WSL.
I don't want to, again, just play the Houston Dash's great PR card, but I do feel like the Houston Dash has done a good job of taking care of its players in the last few years in regards to housing and stuff like that. Katie, does it make your job easier when it comes to growing the league, growing the brand, growing the team, for you to know these players are being taken care of? And maybe retrospectively, has it been hard for you to say, oh, can you come and do this press shoot? Oh, can you come and, share this on social media when you know these people are working maybe 2 jobs or not getting paid enough?
Yeah. I think, something interesting that we decided as a club prior to the CBA and all that, all the players coalescing was, appearance fees, for example. Every other athlete in the world gets an appearance fee, and the women would get one, but it would, historically be less, or it was some kind of in-kind type of arrangement. And the Houston Dash proactively made the decision, 2 years ago, and so we elevated so that all of our players are equally paid on their appearance fees. Doesn't matter who you are. And so, that was really, nice, and frankly should be done. I mean, we look at these things now like, oh, we're finally here and doing that, but this is the stuff that should be happening. It should have already happened, or as it were. So, the ladies being, having housing and different types of things available to them is, I think, absolutely been helpful, because, maybe they don't have to work that second job now, because we're paying, the organization is covering those expenses. And so they don't have to go coach, the youth soccer league or whatever on the side. I mean, some might choose to do those things anyway, but and they can be more available to us. And also, one of the things I'm very keen on is I want the ladies themselves to start building their personal brands. If you look at every other league in the world, the stars of each sport have their own personal brand. And they have their own personal sponsors, more than just XYZ shoe. They have, like, whatever it may be, a soft drink partner, a fashion partner, hygiene partner, whatever. And I think the ladies have just been hustling to play soccer and maybe have a side hustle or this, that, or the other. And now I really look to them to start looking inward personally and carrying themselves and positioning themselves to build their own personal brands, so they can start taking advantage of all these things that all the other sports leagues have take advantage of, and that therefore would in turn increase their own personal wealth and success. So very long answer to say, yeah, I think when we offer those things, it does give them a little more flexibility. I think that's super important as we're building both the league, our club, and then also I really would love to see the girls working on their own as well.
Yeah, I think it's also important. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, after we started, and that was all also because thank you to the press who, like, we saw all these small websites start covering the league and then start revealing all the difficulties some of the players actually had just to make it a practice. I mean, right? Some of them had to go to school on one end of the city, and mind you, Mexico City is a really big city, and then had to go practice to the other side of the city. And actually started losing money because of how much they had to invest to make around town and make it a practice and go to school, because once the league started, we did have an age limit, and that meant that most of the players were under 23 years old. So then most of them were still in college, some of them were high schoolers. So it meant that they did have to still make it to school and then to practice, and then not making enough money to cover both things, right? And then some of the players, they started using social media, like Katie was mentioning, and I think they did accidentally, and now they're a lot more conscious about it now, but some of them did start creating their own brands in the way that they started having their own audiences. And it was something as simple as having like a TikTok or just posting something that went viral. And then you start seeing some of them, they have their own brands. Norma Palafox actually went off to do a reality show. She came back. I think she's part of like a coffee company at some point, or she started investing in one. And then once you started players doing a little bit better, you started seeing some of them go off and start to become managers. So you have some players in Monterrey, for instance, who already have a coaching title. They could actually just end off their play, like just just retire as players and go off and coach, because now they actually have the opportunity to do something other than have another job or just have to go to school. So once clubs start supporting players to be actually able to, yeah, if you want to keep on studying, go on ahead and keep on studying, right? We might even give you a scholarship. Pachuca has a university right next to it. It has its own actual university, and that helps players go to high school there, and then you can practice. You just like leave your stuff at your locker. You just go off to the pitch and start practice. And then some other clubs, they were like, okay, we're going to invest in these players, and we're just going to give them a salary that's good enough for them to actually go off and have. There's a player that has a doctorate degree, I think, in San Luis, right? Which is, by the way, it's like in nuclear energy or something really, really bizarre. But just go on ahead, right? So as long as clubs start seeing this, and players also take advantage of the audience that they're starting to create on social media, yeah, they have their own brands. They get to, obviously they grow their own audience regarding the team as well. But it just allows them, as Katie was mentioning, to not only focus on the league and on the club, but also on themselves.
The last thing I really want us to kind of focus in on is the live experience. Is maybe looking at the game itself in the stadium, selling tickets, because I think this is something that is so different all over the world. Again, speaking on behalf of England, a lot of people have celebrated the fact that Sky Football, the biggest broadcaster in England, spent £10 million on doing the Women's Super League. They gave them money, they gave them the same broadcast and analysis, the booth, they made it look and feel the same. But the attendances week in, week out are still in the kind of 2,000 to 4,000, maybe even less for some of the less big clubs, not your Man Cities, your Manchester Uniteds. Adriana, I think Liga MX has grown a reputation for these massively well-attended grand finales, with 40,000 people there, El Volcan, like it's become such a thing. And again, Katie, some of the CBS numbers for the NWSL are getting bigger and bigger, growing almost 100% sometimes every year. The latest championship final did really well. But maybe attendances outside of Portland are still kind of a bit all over the map. So what is the next step, or what can you share from Mexico, maybe Adriana, that has gone well, for making that in-game experience just the most exciting thing it can be? Because it feels like, we're supporting the players, the pitch is getting better, the broadcasting's getting better. It feels like maybe that's the last thing in certain parts of the world when it comes to women's football.
It's funny because some of the games actually started off being played really, really late and after the men's side. So you would have people going at 7 p.m. to watch the men's side, and then you have to stay at 9 p.m. to watch the women's side. And at first it was like, oh my God, they're just asking too much of these people, because even if they could stay, I mean, you're leaving at 11 p.m. Somewhere on stadium, there's no public transportation. So it's just something, you're asking too much from the fans. But once you start seeing a team like Tigres, like Monterrey, like America and Chivas, that are actually investing in making sure that those teams are really competitive, it just started being a lot more natural for fans to take those, make those sacrifices and make sure they attended those games. It doesn't mean that they have, those audiences all the time. I mean, they do have sometimes, they have games at the club facilities, which don't even allow that many fans to come along, right? It's just like less than 1,000 fans. And some of them are still having to do that because, I don't know, the men's side has a game on Saturday evening. So, of course, you're going to give it to the men's side and not to the women's side. But then what started happening as well was that most of the women's league games were switched to play on Monday nights. So you didn't have to compete with the men's side. You didn't have a scheduling conflict with the stadium and making sure that fans didn't have to choose between seeing one game or seeing the other. So once they started having games on Mondays, mind you, some of those games were really, really late as well, right? It was 9 p.m. on a Monday, and I was like, who's going to go to the Universitario on a Monday night at 9 p.m., right? People have to work, but they did because they started seeing a team. It turns out they did. So then once you started seeing that the club responded to people's confidence as well and make sure they had a really competitive team that really never took for granted fans making it out to a stadium at 9 p.m. on a Monday night, it was just like a domino effect, right? It helped the team, and the team helped make sure that the audience was really happy to see them. And that just started making sure that the league kept on growing. It doesn't happen with every single club. There's still clubs that have to work on that. But it has been some of an example set by some of the bigger teams to make sure that the others just follow along and make sure that, hey, we're investing in players, right? And even if they're not players that we bring in from abroad, because we do have foreign players now, which we didn't at the beginning of the league, we're making sure that those that are coming in from the U17 level, which is just starting off its first tournament, are also getting to know, the audience is getting to know them. We're making sure they're getting attention. We're making sure that they're prepared for first team performances. And then that just starts building with the audience, and then the audience is really eager to go and support them. I mean, we sometimes see it, how the women's side is doing particularly well and is fighting for a championship, and the men's side is doing terribly. And then it also makes sure that fans are equally just really, really asking the same kind of commitment from both teams as well. So it's kind of like it's both a responsibility from the club and from the fans as well, just making sure that you have those performances, but also have that same confidence from the audience to make sure that we get those audiences like we have for the Tigres Monterrey, which is now just a clásico, for Liga MX Femenil. You have those games and it's going to be sold out, it's going to be amazing, people are going to be chanting the entire game, and it's probably going to be one of those finals as well, right? But you want other teams to just do as well, just because you don't want the same team to make it to the final every single season.
Yeah, and I would say from my perspective, I have two kind of things. Goals is one, we've partnered with Athens Women's Football Summit, for those that are familiar, and their whole goal is to promote and grow the women's game around the world, and so building those relationships with clubs globally is important, and they are a good conduit for us. We've gotten to meet a lot of folks over in Europe and whatnot through that, and again, going back to what I said earlier about our relationship with Tigres and what we've been able to do there, and so taking key learnings from people that are a step ahead of us, and so that's obviously important, and taking them, applying them to our marketplace and our fans, and how we can be successful here. Concurrently, another thing that I personally believe in is, folks like all superstar athletes, of course, the greatest of whatever sport it is. But, fans also love just the person behind it if they know who it is. So I like to tell in the Houston market is J.J. Watt, who used to be a defensive player for the NFL team here in Houston. He's no longer here. He's actually plays for the Arizona NFL team. But JJ personally, yes, he was known for being a good football player. That's great and all, but he was so known for so much more. He was known for what he did in the community, what he stood for, and his relationships with partners in the community and organizations. And people got to know him as a person, and they liked him, and they wanted to support him. And so even now that he's in Arizona playing for a different NFL team, he still has such a huge fan base here in Houston, whereas normally people would be like, oh, he left us. But so I think a great opportunity for the ladies is, again, back to building their personal brand, not only for corporate sponsorship and all that, but I think it helps build fan affinity for the sport and the league, and let alone them personally. And that's only going to help grow, like I said, all those individual entities exponentially. So I think those are, that's a soft way. Obviously, experientially in the stadium, we are very mindful of having the exact same experience for our women as we do the men. We have the same game, scoreboards and entertainment and all those basic things that people, like some other people, would maybe minimize. Well, that's a priority for us. We have the exact same staff working both games. We are doing the same media outreach to all of our news affiliates and whatnot. So, we are treating them the same and not minimizing them internally, which the opportunity is there. We know it. We've seen it. People care about women's soccer. We've just got to make it easy, to your point, Adriana, and for them to care and attend and be present and be active and have relationships virtually or whatever with players. And, so I think all those things are going to, build upon each other to help build this game for the ladies. And the future is bright. I mean, there's no question. think all the right levers are being pulled, and so we're very excited about our future here, and being the only women's soccer team in the great state of Texas. So, which is a very big deal since we're like a very important state, if I don't say so myself. So we're very proud.
I'm pretty sure you're getting some Theodores fans your way, Katie. I'm pretty sure just with Maria there, you're getting some Theodores fans your way pretty soon, if not already there. I actually saw a Houston Dash jersey, someone carrying a Houston Dash jersey, following and just chasing Maria down from the Estadio Sur where the national team played. So I'm going to send that your way, because I was actually surprised. Someone had not a Theodores jersey, but a Houston Dash jersey, and started following Maria and chasing her car to make sure that she had an autograph. So it's happening. And you start seeing slowly, but it is happening.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it helps, I mean, obviously Houston being the most international city in America, which a lot of people don't know. And we are the most international city in America. The most languages are spoken here, everything. So this is the hotbed for us to be successful in learning from our global counterparts and partnering with them. So that's why, that's a priority for us as well. So.
That's a fantastic place to finish on, Katie. You put it so succinctly. I love that. Learning from your counterparts across the world. Adriana, if you're ever in Houston, I would love to get the orange carpet out for you. And I'm sure Katie would. And I'm sure Maria would love to score some goals for you. So we'll see you down in Texas, if not in Mexico City when the team's training out there next week. They've got a friendly against Pumas, although I don't believe it's open to the public. But Adriana, maybe you can sort that out. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here.
Pull some strings.
It's been so fantastic to have such brilliant minds kind of just going through all these ideas. Like we said, it's such a big thing. There is no right answers. It is going to be a process, but it's beautiful to know that it is changing and we're all a part of that. And it's really, really great. So Katie, Adriana, thank you so much for your time. Ashlee, who was here earlier, thank you so much as well. Tune in to other panels for the Striker Texas 2022 Soccer Summit. This will be available on demand. You'll find it on the site, and all the best. Enjoy the weather the rest of your day and the season incoming. I hope to see you online both very soon, and maybe Katie in the stadium, maybe Adriana as well. Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you.